Hello guys, so today I'll be talking about how to play with the hanging pawns, and I'll be joined by my good friend International Master Attila Turzo. He'll be presenting to you games that are very instructive about playing with the hanging pawns. So I'll be presenting right now briefly what I think with playing with the hanging pawns is to me, what it's meaning to me. So my understanding about playing with the hanging pawns is that you want to maintain the middle game. You don't want to trade pieces off all the same because you're going to have a worse end game most of the times, and you want to have your pieces active to make sure that you press down your opponent. That way, they're going to be under pressure with the open files. We have the E and B files, and basically that's it. So you want to make sure that you maintain your ability to maintain the structure of the game and don't fall for any of the traps that occur typically with the hanging pawns. But I'll leave it over to my friend Attila Turzo now to present the first game, and I'll see you on the other side.
Hello dear viewers, welcome to this video. I will show you here two games about how to play with the hanging pawns. The key ideas will be these games to how to use the hanging pawns actually to gain space or make the position dynamic. So after you even sacrifice the pawn, one of the hanging pawns, you get very active piece play, and you can use that activity to direct to the against the opponent king or gaining some other advantage. So how to transform actually the power of the hanging pawns to some another kind of advantage. Let's see the first game, which was played by Garry Kasparov with the white pieces against Lajos Portis, the black pieces. Lajos Portis actually is from the same country where I live in Hungary. He was a top 10 player for a long time in the 70s and 80s, and they played this game in 1983. So Kasparov started with d4, Portis played knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, b6, the queen's Indian defense, knight c3, bishop b7, and here Kasparov played his favorite way to handle the queen's Indian defense, a3, to prevent all these bishop b4 lines, and would like to maybe develop the bishop sometimes to g5. Black played d5, c takes d5. Yeah, here possible the other lines which several times he played with bishop g5, bishop e7, playing a little bit similar to like a queen's gambit declined. Here he played c takes d5, knight takes d5, e3, a line which looks kind of like very solid and slow, but as we see, it can be strong in the future when all the pieces are ready for the action. Knight takes c3, b takes c3. A little bit also this structure reminds me for the Grünfeld type of position, the center, so white may build up a nice center and black tries to attack it, so kind of like a hyper modern school. First allow the opponent to build up a nice center and then try to attack that center. So continue the development with bishop e7. Here comes a smart move, bishop b5 check. It's typical in several openings when the bishop makes a move which looks first maybe a little bit useless because black can just play c6 and the bishop needs to move again, but it has the advantage it's actually provocating the c6 move which blocks the b7 bishop, but black decides just to continue with c5 to solve that problem immediately. So c5 castling knight c6. As you see, all the minor pieces are developed for black. White also developed his last piece with bishop b2. Now this b2 square is a natural position for the dark square bishop, but of course it's later need to move those pawns because they are blocking him, like the c3 and the d4 pawn. But the b2 bishop can be a very good one to target the black's king's position, the g7 square in the future. Okay, let's look how will this go. Continue. So rook c8, black continue the development, queen e2, castling. So as you see, both players follow the principles of the opening, try to get control of the center, develop the pieces and keep the kings castled. And here comes the middle game where we need to creating plans. Here white just continued with rook a d1. Now the white plan is to try to move on his extra pawns around the center. So with e4 or c4, we look how it goes. Probably c4 looks more logical because it opens up also the diagonal for the b2 bishop. Okay, here black played queen c7, the developing move for black. It's c4. After e4, which would lead to similar to the Grünfeld type of centers, knight a5 would be a move to, with the idea of try to control the c4 square, and maybe after the changing on the pawns on d4 with knight c4 to get counterplay on the queen side. But white wanted to avoid that, so played c4. Okay, and after capturing on d4, c takes d4, e takes d4. Here we are in the situation, the famous hanging pawns. Let me make some colors for them. So we have those pawns which, they can be also target, but also they can have some power. Their power, if you found it in their dynamic possibilities, when they can be pushed forward to open up space for other pieces, or push back also the opponent's pieces, like playing for d4, d5 or c4, c5. Actually, those are their potential. Sometimes they just wait here until the other pieces are ready for the action, but that's the clear target. When you have this hanging pawns, you try to push them, at least one of them, and gaining some more new squares for the attack. Here actually Portis played knight a5 to targeting immediately one of the hanging pawns. That's normally the critical test also of the hanging pawns, if they can be attacked, and sometimes they can be also weak because the opponents try to block them and attack them and win them. Probably this is final phase of the opening. Probably Kasparov already prepared this idea at home. It's time to, so it could play something like rook c1 to try to start to make a defense, but here's already time and possibility for an attacking idea, playing d5, opening up for the b2 bishop. And as you see already, both bishops are targeting the black king. Also the knight is there to join the party, plus the queen. Of course, this is also kind of like an intuitive move, because maybe you cannot calculate all the possibilities when you want maybe to sacrifice a pawn. But if you have many pieces targeted around the area where you want to attack, then you can have the confidence to go for a pawn sacrifice and hope for the best. Okay, here black captured the d5 pawn. There was an option also to capture on c4, but then let's see, then another way to attack the king would be queen e4, g6, and after the exchanges on c4, queen e5 would be just really powerful. f6, queen takes e6, rook f7, rook c1, queen a6, and after d6, the white pawn became actually very strong pass pawn. So this is also kind of like a transformation of the hanging pawns. Sometimes if they will be exchanged, there became maybe like an isolated pawn from the hanging pawns, and sometimes the isolated pawn can be a strong pass pawn, like in this case. Okay, let's go back to the game. After d5, c takes d5, bishop takes d5. And so it's a pawn sacrifice, but actually just a temporary sacrifice because white can win back now the pawn. Maybe you can just pause the video for a moment and try to find it yourself. Okay, so bishop takes h7. It's a discovered attack on the d5 bishop. King takes h7, rook takes d5. And the rook is also ready to jump in with rook h5 to attack the black king. The hanging pawns disappeared from the board, so this we could look at transformation. So those pawns were transformed actually to a kingside attack. And here we could even stop the game, but I will show you how this attack continued. So king g8, because this is really one of the best games I think from Kasparov, how to handle the attack. It's also very important when you have the momentum, you should, most of the time you should keep going as quickly as possible, because if the opponent gets some heirs, maybe a move, then he can protect himself, defend, and then the advantage can disappear. Here bishop takes g7, very, very powerful sacrifice to open up the king. King takes g7 and knight e5. So this is kind of like a hard calculation, hard moves, because it's not going with the check actually, but just centralizing the knight and opening up for the queen the diagonal to go to g4. Actually here black could try a few different ways, but it's like example f5 to control the g4 square, but then rook d7 comes and black has no defense. Let's look the game. Rook fd8 was played to giving square for the king on f8. Queen g4 check, king f8. Continue the pressure with queen f5. The f7 pawn is hanging. And again, there are a few different ways to try to protect, like the bishop can move a bishop d6, then queen f6. We are ready to go with knight g6, or if bishop takes e5, I think then probably rook takes e5 and queen h8 is a checkmate. So black should kind of sacrifice the queen for the rook to avoid the checkmate. So in the game f6 was played, knight d7 check, rook takes d7, rook takes d7, queen c5. So looks like black is still surviving. So white needs to keep the initiative. Queen h7, the idea is threatening checkmate with queen h8, plus also the idea is rook takes e7, queen takes e7, then queen h8 check and capturing the c8 rook. Rook c7 just defends the bishop. There's a little trap if after, rook d3 with the idea of rook g3, rook g8, would be a nice little trap, which actually would change the result. Yeah, it would change the result of the game actually. Queen takes f2. Because if king takes, then comes the discover check, winning the queen. And now in the endgame, probably the two pieces and the pawn on the queen side better than the rook. So probably this would give some winning chances even for black. But white did not fall into this trap, but instead of rook d3 played check, h8. And then comes the rook black when there is no discovered attack on the king and queen anymore. Knight c4, rook fd1. Defense would be bishop d6, but after rook h3 would face still serious problems, and this would be still probably winning for white, but it would be harder. Played knight e5, and after knight e5 the attack just now will be overwhelming. Queen h7 check, king e6, queen g8 check, king needs to go to f5, g4 is coming, king f4, rook d4, so the checkmate actually kind of unavoidable. King f3, queen b3 check. One more. Here is resigned, actually Portish resigned. The game may continue with queen c3, then queen d5 check, king e2, queen e4 check, queen e3, rook d2 checkmate. Anatoly Karpov against Viktor Korchnoi. Actually, they played this in their World Championship match in 1981 in Merano. Actually, this was the first game of the match. So Korchnoi played with c4, started with c4, Karpov played e6, then knight c3 comes d5, d4, so we got a queen's gambit declined, bishop e7, knight f3, knight f6, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, castling, e3, b6, so the Tartakower variation, very solid way to play with black. Rook c1, bishop b7, bishop e2. As you see, both players again nicely developing all their pieces. Knight b d7. Here white captured on d5 with the idea of blocking the bishop's diagonal if black captures with the e-pawn, or if the knight captures, then probably he gets some possibility on the center later, or he tries to push maybe the e-pawn. But Karpov decided just to capture with the pawn, keep the full control of the center. Castling, c5, challenge the center, Okay, and here actually already we got the hanging pawns after d takes c5, b takes c5. Yeah, white could play like queen c2. Probably that would be better for him actually to keep the full control of the center and play maybe queen c2, rook d1 first, and only later think about if he wants to really capture on c5 or not. Okay. Also, there is an idea which was even known from the past. So normally you should not create hanging pawns when the conditions do not exist to expose them to strong pressure and to attack them. So if you don't feel like you have the good possibility to attack those pawns and maybe fix them and then have some good pressure on them, it's better to not create them. So like in this case example, it's better to not capture on c5, but maybe first play, rook d1 and look if we can make some more ideas how to pressurize them. Or maybe like playing queen a4 and bishop a6 to somehow try to be more active pieces, and then only when maybe we exchange that b7 bishop, which defends the d5 pawn, then we would think about creating the hanging pawns. Okay, but let's look what happened in this game. So d takes c5 and capture with the... Of course, in this type positions, I look many times black captures like with the knight to c5, and then there will be just one pawn, not two, so that will be an isolated pawn on d5, and then try to use the advantage of that d5 pawn countering the e4 square. So maybe later something like capture and then going this way to jumping in the center. Okay, but let's look. This not happened here, so capture with the b pawn, queen c2, rook c8, rook fd1. We both developing pieces, queen b6. Continue the development of the pieces and be ready maybe to advance those pawns. b1. Yeah, it's a little bit passive. Rook fd8, rook c2. Yeah, it's so actually white wants to start. Yeah, queen e6. It's a nice reposition of the queen to supporting those pawns. Yeah, if now rook cd2 comes, the knight e4 would be a strong to creating pressure on the rook, and also after the exchanges would be nice position for knight may come to e5 in the future after the exchanges of pawns. So bishop g3 was played first, knight h5. Yeah, black is happy to get the bishop pair because the position will probably still open. Knight takes g3, h takes g3, knight f6. So still everything under control. Queen c2, g6. As you see, black has time to make all the things which he wants to prepare. Probably wants to play maybe king to g7 to have a little bit better position of the king, going from the back rank. Queen a4, a6, just preventing maybe the knight b5 move. Bishop d3. Yeah, now another plan from white, he wants to increase the pressure maybe on the d5 pawn from the bishop to moving to a2 with bishop b1, bishop a2. King g7, queen b6, a3. Okay, and this is the time when when it's time to set in motion. So time to start to push the pawns. Everything is ready, and actually when you are facing the hanging pawns, you need to always be ready, and you need to always calculate if they can be moved or not, like always looking for c4 and d4 moves. Also when you play with the hanging pawns or when you play against them, so those moves you need to check after each move. And this is the moment when Karpov decided to play d4. No, this can be like kind of like a pawn sacrifice, again for activity. Let's look what happens if he tries to win the pawn. He takes d4, then bishop c6. Yeah, and there are several ways to move, like queen c2 example, then bishop takes f3, g takes f3, capturing. Yeah, and actually the pawn's protected because we eliminated one of the attacker, the f3 knight, and after this, it's a very Yeah, actually now the queen is also hanging on c2 and the knight, so looks like this is winning for black. So capture, yeah. Also, if capturing on c5 like an intermediate move, this also not doing too much good. Yeah, because after, yeah, if white captures the queen, we capture the rook, so black wins the exchange. Knight needs to move. That was a, sad realization. Knight e2, but that then it makes, now again our hanging pawns shows its power to destroying the opponent's structure. D takes e3, f takes e3, c4, opening up the diagonal to attack the newly created isolated e3 pawn. Knight d4, yeah, that's just a nice square for the knight, so white, I guess, hopes to stop the activity and build up a defense. Queen c7 attacking the other weakness on g3, yeah, which is not easy to defend now. Knight h4, yeah, try to make some tricky moves. If queen takes g3, the knight f5 would fork the king and the queen. Queen e5 attacking again the e3 pawn. King h1. So, need to be always careful. Again, the e3 pawn is still untouchable because the knight f4. Now the king goes out of that tactical team. Okay, and here, yeah, black has space advantage, better placed pieces, pair of bishops, plus white has these weak pawns, so that makes the job to finish relatively easy for black. So knight f3, queen takes g3, rook takes d8, bishop takes d8, queen b4, bishop e4. Yeah, happy to exchange the bishop. Actually wants to get the knight to e4. That's why he wants to exchange the bishop, because then that would be a very powerful attacker on the king. As we see, rook d4, knight f2 check, king g1, knight d3, queen b7, rook b8 to protect the rook, queen d7, bishop c7. Yeah, may join the attack. h1, takes b2, rook takes d3, c takes d3, queen takes d3. Yeah, I wanted to eliminate that dangerous knight, but now black is up a pawn and the exchange. So ready to exchange queens, which he wants to avoid. With queen e4, rook d1 check, knight g1. Queen d6, another checkmate threat on h2, knight h, f3. And then decided to reposition the rook to h5. And here, yeah, white just resigned because the advantage is so big.